Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, it's been a hectic week for both of us, but how are you doing right now?
I'm wonderful. I generally spend a lot of my time working from home, and now I have kids here, which makes everything happen. It just, productivity goes through the roof. Everything is operating really smoothly here. So yeah, everything's great. How about at your house?
Yeah, good. You know, every kid is like an administrative assistant without an adult life that they're bogged down by. They're so helpful. They make their own lunches, they do their own thing. And when you need something, they're the first to go get it, sharpen this pencil. It's like the NCAA would appreciate it. It's like free labor.
Exactly. Like, hey, kids, that trampoline's not going to go jump on itself. Why don't you go head out there and let daddy do some actual work? Okay, thanks. That'd be great. Bye. Have fun.
Yeah. So, Tom, we got a lot to talk about. And we had so much that we're actually going to push some of it aside and maybe do a Sunday show for a Tuesday turnaround. We don't want to step on the Sloopcast toes on Monday because you know how those guys get. But there is still plenty to talk about. We got to speak with Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson, and I was just there. I should remember all of these. Who is the other offensive coordinator?
Mike Yurcich.
Yes.
You should actually know the other offensive coordinator, even if you hadn't been in interviews. That's kind of a key person on the staff.
And who does he coach for? Yeah, so it was the coordinators and the head coach that we got to speak with. The other coordinators being Greg Madison and Jeff Hafley. Boom, 2 for 2 right there in your face, Tom. Today we'll focus mainly on Day and the defense. But before we get to that, Tom, I've got 3 names here for you.
America's favorite new game show. I'm like the opposite of that James what's his name guy in Jeopardy who's just blowing everyone away. I am America's new sweetheart because I absolutely cannot play this one game. So go ahead, Gerd. Let's embarrass me.
If this is your first time tuning into the show, I like to ask Tom old-timey names from football history, and he has to give me the year that these guys played based on their name. Now, Tom, I'm going to make it a little easier for you this time. I only have Ohio State players, okay?
I hope the first one is Orlando Pace.
No, it is not. The first one is Claude H. Birdseye.
Well, I know that they stopped putting initials in the Ohio State roster or Letterman winner list probably sometime in the 30s. So I'm going to say Claude H. Birdseye was sometime before the 30s. Let's go with 1906.
Oh no, 1901. Oh, Tom.
Wait, I had a 5-year grace period, didn't I?
I think you're right. Is that the first one you've read?
I think that's the first one I got. Yes.
5 years. Oh, this game is terrible. This is no longer any fun. All right, let's just run through these next two, and we don't need to talk about it. Chelsea A. Boone.
Chelsea A. Boone.
Now remember, Tom, males were no longer allowed to be named Chelsea after 1902. So keep that in mind.
I guess I'm going to go with 1896.
No, 1909.
Oh,
you can still
see?
Be named,
Yeah.
I fooled you with math, Tom. And a fake fact. Now, this last one, I had no idea this guy was ever a Buckeye. Brooklyn Bridge.
I feel like I would have seen that name in the media guide at some point if that was really a person. Is there really a person named Brooklyn Bridge?
It's really a person, and yes, and I will give you another clue. Brooklyn B. Bridge.
Let's see. The Brooklyn Bridge was built in the 18...
Just talk it out, Tom. That's going to help.
I want to say 1874, but I might be off on that. So this is probably someone who was born not long after that, when it was still a big, exciting novelty. So I will say 1897.
1912. Sorry, Tom. And the bad thing is each of those guys only played 1 year, which made this a really difficult guess for you. But you got the first one. That's, you're like now 1 for 8 or
That's
so.
good.
So congratulations.
I'm hoping that me getting one correct makes this less fun for you, and therefore we don't have to do it anymore.
You pretty much, it's exactly what has happened. I didn't even want to do those last two, but I didn't want you to end on a win. So we can now get back to the current day of football. On Wednesday, we talked to Ryan Day, and I guess the initial purpose was for him to speak about the fund that he and his wife have started for with Nationwide Children's Hospital regarding mental health for children, adolescents, teenagers, and we'll get to that in a bit. But obviously, the questions that he got from everybody else were football related. One of the obviously Justin Fields was a popular topic, and this is something where nothing has really changed, and yet people still want to know. We still want to know: how's he doing? Is he ready? Is he better than he was? And basically, all Ryan Day is saying is like, well, there's no substitute for experience. We're not able to be on the field, and even when we're on the field in the spring, it's only practice. It's not real. He's not live. It's not this. It's not that. And so now he's doing his work on his own. He's studying. Ryan Day mentioned that they'll do some virtual reality work with him as well. That might be an interesting topic to delve into if they would allow us to talk to the coaches during the off season. Just see, what that entails. But everything that Buckeye fans would want Justin Fields to be doing now and excelling at, it sounds like he is doing so. And we got that from Mike Yursich as well. But this is not an offensive show today. It's defensive. But still, if I had planned this better, I would have skipped this for the next show. But, so Tom, basically, Justin Fields, we don't know what kind of starter he's going to be, but he's doing everything you want your starter to be doing, just as Dwayne Haskins did. Except the difference between like Fields and other new starters is Justin Fields has way more experience than most new starters, including Dwayne Haskins.
He did play a decent amount down at Georgia last year, that's a good start. He's only been in a college offense 1 year, but he has been in a college offense 1 year. Day talked about it on Wednesday. Fields has all the physical talents you could possibly want, and it's really just an experience issue. And he has his 1 year of experience. They are trying to cram 10 pounds of experience into a 5-pound bag this summer and get him as ready as they can for the start of the season. And that is something that we have talked about in the past. The Ohio State offense is probably going to look better at the end of the season than it does at the start of the season. And Justin Fields and getting that experience is the number one reason why. You've got some offensive line that as that unit gels with 4 new starters, that will help. But Justin Fields, getting him into the system, getting him the reps, that is the number one thing that is going to determine exactly how high or low this Ohio State offense ends up this fall.
And I think we both expect it to be very good, just because that's, you've got the talent all around him, and then you also have the talent that happens to be Justin Fields, not just a runner, a guy who won the Elite 11 competition in the summer of 2018. So he's more than just this runner who can also throw. He's a thrower who happens to, somebody said, got timed into 4 threes this past week at Ohio State. And they did their times in their little combines, but nobody was going to give us any times when we spoke with the coaches on Wednesday. Another area that Day talked about was the offensive line. Proof that he listens to this show. He also has high hopes for this offensive line. We don't know who they're going to be. You and I, we have this idea of what they're going to be. I asked, and I won't get into it much, but I asked Kevin Wilson, and he's waiting to see exactly who it's all going to be. But we have a good idea, and even the guys that there's 6 or 7 guys that you could see starting, and that's always a good thing when you're replacing 4 starters, and you see 6 or 7 guys who are good enough to start. And it's different than, well, these are your 6 or 7 best, and they're not very good, but the starters are going to come from that. These guys are all good enough to start on a good offensive line, in my opinion. And so when you've got those guys, you're choosing from those guys, and we don't even know about, Jonah Jackson is still coming in. We'll see how good Harry Miller is right away. But Ryan Day is very confident in this offensive line, and he also mentioned Thayer Munford, which is something that you and I have talked about. That's maybe the biggest concern on the team right now, is if he's not going to be ready. And by Day's account, Thayer Munford had a great workout this past week. He has no concerns about him being ready for this season. And so, Tom, all of our concerns, about this offensive line and the offense, really that's the biggest concern. Day is like, listen, guys, I listen to your show. I hear you belly aching about it. I just want to let you know Thayer Munford is fine. Love the show. Rack me. I'd have to check the transcription to see if those were his exact words, but he's like us. He thinks this offensive line could be pretty darn good.
Yeah, the pieces are all there, and it's more of a matter of how the pieces fit together than do they have enough pieces to fit there. Because if Thayer Munford doesn't go, then it's Josh Allaby who's at left tackle, and Josh Allaby is played a perfectly respectable right tackle in the Rose Bowl. Like they know what Josh Allaby can do, and Josh Allaby is absolutely capable of playing at the Ohio State level of play if they need him to. And if Thayer Munford is in fact good to go, like Ryan Day certainly seemed like he was saying, then Josh Allaby has the potential to move to right tackle, and then you've got Nicholas Petit-Frere and Josh Allaby at right tackle. You've got options inside. You've got Wyatt Davis at guard. You've got Brandon Bowen can slot in somewhere. I mean, they have, and like you said, that doesn't even include Jonah Jackson. So there are options all over the place that are good, solid options that they know. I think that they feel capable, very comfortable with the fact that any of those guys can play at the level they need them to play. I didn't even mention Josh Myers. They've been talking highly about Josh Myers for basically a full calendar year now, almost. So I think they're comfortable with what they've got, and it's just a matter of which of those guys fits in where on the offensive line. What the luxury there is, if someone gets hurt, then there shouldn't be much of a drop off. You should be able to roll in whoever's next man up and go from there. Thayer Munford is without a question the keystone to that line. If you've got Munford in there, that is the most important spot on that line, that left tackle spot. If you have that returning starter there and he really is good to go, like Ryan Day certainly seemed like he feels like he is, that is a huge lift for that line and what it can be this year.
Yeah, and when I say 6 or 7 guys, you got to look. One of Allaby, Petit-Frere, or Munford won't be starting. One of Jonah Jackson and Brandon Bowen won't be starting. So that gives you 2 guys on the bench who can play anywhere you need, basically, because Brandon Bowen can be a guard or a tackle. If, say, Allaby could be any of the tackles you need. Jonah Jackson, if he's not a starter, he can be a guard or a center. So you've got the versatility in your 6th guy and your 7th guy as well, which makes you, out of those 7, you almost have 7 or 8 instead of just 6 or 7, and their versatility makes them even deeper, and which is one of the reasons why I keep saying that this offensive line is going to be better, but mostly because I just like their demeanor more than last year's offensive line as well, and I think they will have the proper attitude. Tom, one of the other things that Ryan Day talked about a lot of stuff. He was asked about living with expectations now that he's Ohio State's head coach and how people deal with him now. And I just wanted to read this quote, and it's pretty lengthy, but I think it sums him up very well, and I think it puts him in a light that Buckeye fans would maybe better understand him, or gives them a better understanding of him. And I'll just read that. And a lot of people come up and they say you get a lot of pressure, or they start talking about the expectations. That's a big thing that I get a lot. It's been the same thing all along. I say you can't worry about that. And people ask me, what if you don't beat the team up north? What if you don't win the Big Ten championship or a national championship? And I always come back with, well, what if I do? And that's the mentality I've always had. Maybe it goes back to what happened when I was young and nothing was guaranteed in life. That's always the way I've been. So let's go play. Let's try to maximize the day the best we can. And we're not going to be hesitant about anything. We're not going to be apprehensive. We're going to go after people and be aggressive, because that's the way I think you've got to be in life. Right? That's the way you've got to live life. You've got to be aggressive that way. To start getting anxiety or worry about losing is not going to happen. And that's, to me, that's like the perfect attitude for an offensive coordinator. And now if you bring that to the entire team, where you're attacking everything. And Urban Meyer did that to an extent. Although sometimes maybe he would, these last couple of years with the defense, you could say things got a little, he wasn't attacking there. But the way Ryan Day talks about expectations and some of the background when he talks about what happened when I was young, he didn't really get into too much of this on Wednesday, but when he was a child, his father committed suicide. And so he learned a lot of things at an early age. One of them was being, like you said, nothing is guaranteed in life. So being hesitant in certain aspects really doesn't do you any good, or being worried about expectations. Rather just go out and meet your own expectations, create those expectations, and just attack each next step. And I think not only is it a good message, but it was almost like a reintroduction of Ryan Day to the fans in terms of what he is as Ohio State's head coach.
The general attitude there is kind of optimistic, which is what you'd want to have out of your head coach. I think there's he's not being arrogant there, but there is a certain amount of, okay, let's see it in your first year for any coach. You're not just going to assume that it's going to magically all work itself out, but he has to go in with that attitude, because you don't want to go in questioning yourself. You don't want to go in saying, "Oh, well, what, you're right. What if we do lose to Michigan this year? That would be pretty bad." Like you can't go in with that attitude. So that's exactly what you want, and then you have to just go out and back it up on the field. And I think Jim Harbaugh came in his first season and was, optimistic and who's got it better than us? Nobody, and all that stuff. And then that's great. That's all well and good. That's exactly what you got to say. But then you got to go back it up on the field. So if Ryan Day can back it up on the field better than Jim Harbaugh has, then that's great. And things will say status quo, which would probably be just fine with everyone in Columbus. So, but his overall attitude is exactly what you would want out of a head coach. Now it's just a matter of, okay, now go out. You're talking it up. Now let's go out and do it.
So you're saying a poor answer would have been something like, did you see what I did against Oregon State?
Hey, that was 77 points, which is, pretty good. And if it wasn't for, who in the defensive coach's room, that game would have been over a lot earlier.
Yeah, no, let's call him Greg S. No.
No, that's too obvious. Let's go with G. Schiano.
And as I mentioned earlier, Day and his wife started the fund for mental health awareness. And that was something that Urban Meyer started talking about quite a bit last year. Day said that they'll have 2 sports psychologists in the program. And I don't know if for those of us who have been around like depression or any type of mental illness, it is as real as any other type of sickness that sends you to a hospital or puts you in some type of grave situation. It's as real as any of that, and it takes treatment just like anything else. And I'm hear like college football coaches talking about it now, and all of the assistants talked about it as well on Wednesday. Some of them were like Kevin Wilson, and I think a couple of others were citing social media as maybe being part of the cause of all of this, of a lot of the anxiety, to where your players, people are out there more, they're getting criticized more, it's harder to just stay in your own lane or be your own thing, and you're reading all of this stuff, you're taking all of this stuff in, and I guess it, like what is it, junk in, junk out, or whatever that that whole thing is. But I think there is some truth that it's not just a social media thing, obviously, because depression has been around a lot longer, and anxiety and all of these issues have been around a lot longer. But in terms of the mental health aspect of the players, when they're so focused on that, I think the social media absolutely is involved with that. We remember Isaiah Prince in 2016, when after the Penn State game, his phone had to be taken away from him because of how terrible Buckeye fans were to him. But that's just one aspect of it. So I'm thinking back to like the old time football coaches who would see this as a sign of weakness, or something that they wouldn't even want on their team. And now to embrace it or acknowledge it and say you can't get away from it. And if any of our players are dealing with this, we want to be able to help them. Coaches have come a long way, and I don't know, Ohio State's usually on the forefront of stuff like this. And I think pretty much this is the way it's going to be within the next few years, where everybody is on board with making sure players in all sports are as treated as well as possible in terms of this being a real live issue like any other health problem.
Well, you mentioned older coaches thinking that, that this was a sign of weakness. I mean, there are a lot of ways in which older coaches were idiots. I mean, older coaches, there was a generation of coaches that thought drinking water during practice was a sign of weakness. Like, no, you're dumb. That's medical science has come a long way since the days of the Junction Boys and all of that. There is the issue of depression, the related issue of drug addiction. Those are kind of coming into the forefront now. And they're related, and your people are starting to talk about them now in a way that they didn't before. And Urban Meyer's issue that he sort of championed throughout his time was cancer, and that's the kind of thing that a lot of coaches have gotten on board with, and that's obviously a rather a very serious issue that has touched pretty much every family in America at some point, one way or another. I think this is an indication of a younger generation of coach who's maybe, coming of age, coming to prominence at a time when now some new issues are kind of coming to the forefront. And good for Ryan Day. That is an awesome cause for him to champion, because it's something that people are just now starting to talk about in a way that 5-10 years ago they didn't. That was something that was really kind of in the shadows, and you didn't really hear about childhood depression 10 years ago. That was just not a thing that people talked about. And it wasn't because kids weren't going through stuff. It's just because it was not something that people talked about, because there was kind of the old-timey mentality that, tough it out and suck it up and all of that. So good for Ryan Day and his wife for doing this, for taking this on, for being the face of this, because this is something that, there are always awareness campaigns for different diseases. This is something where there really is a legitimate cause for an awareness campaign. This is something that he can help bring more into the forefront and really, really help people and really help change some lives. And just I have mentioned this at some point in the past, but just while we're on the topic here, my day job is with a nonprofit that offers a free 13-month residential drug and alcohol rehab. So if you or someone you know is struggling with some sort of an addiction issue, there is help available. You can go to therefugeohio.org. Again, it's therefugeohio.org. It is entirely free, like really, no kidding. You're not going to get a bill later. Really, no kidding, free, no money, no insurance. That their addiction rehab can be a very expensive thing, can be a very hard thing to find. But there are resources available, so feel free to tweet me, DM me, message me, however you want to message me if you have questions. But if you are going through issues like that with addiction, there is help available, and all you have to do is ask, and people are there who want to help you.
Absolutely. And you mentioned awareness, and I don't know that this is the first I've seen of this being a coach's cause. When we talk about mental health of younger people, so even that is already brings awareness right away, because Ryan Day puts it out on Twitter. The 17 websites and publications that cover Ohio State put that out there, and it reaches I don't know, 89% of Ohio State fans, which is a large swath of people. And then I'm sure the funding kicks in right away. Everybody includes the link. Here's how you help. And I saw somebody who follows me, and I tweeted out, I retweeted Ryan Day's tweet about, starting this fund. And somebody replied to that saying, I wish this was around when I was younger, because I had to live with these issues with no help. And it doesn't make things easier as you grow into adulthood. And I think recognizing and addressing issues, obviously, when you're younger, allows you to cope, allows you to not get over stuff, but allows you to deal with or figure out how to deal with certain issues. And the sooner that gets recognized, the better. And the sooner the stigma is removed from it, the better. And when you have perhaps the most popular person in Ohio touting this and saying this is okay and you're not alone and we've all gone through this and everybody has dealt with this, and this isn't just a private thing, this isn't just a you problem, this is an us problem. I think that alone, just his name attached to it now, and then that's a very good thing. So yeah, like you said, props to him, and just continue to bang that drum, and because it's not going to get better in terms of people coming along. There's always, this issue is always going to be there. So the more avenues you have to deal with it, the better. So we talked with Greg Madison, Jeff Hafley. Although this is gonna upset some Buckeye fans right away. Greg Madison, Tom, very high on Pete Werner. So people need to understand that Greg Madison is a total bust. This guy does not know what he's doing. No. I like Pete Werner. You like Pete Werner. He was put in situations that Evel Knievel shouldn't have even been put in. A younger Evel Knievel shouldn't have been put in those situations. And I think Greg Madison even talked a little bit about that on Wednesday, where he's like, Pete Werner can do a lot of stuff, but you don't necessarily want him matching up with a running back or a wide receiver out wide. That's why it's good to have a bullet. Tom, who knew? It's better to have a guy who can cover, who has experience covering to cover a running back or a receiver rather than a linebacker. Is this witchcraft?
I'm not sure. This is one of these things, I guess, that football must be a really complicated game, more complicated than I thought, because I don't think we had any indication that was an issue last year. That really, wow, that was, wow. I guess the coaches are smarter than something mumbling, trailing off. Yeah. You have to take everyone on the Ohio State defense this year and just give them a clean slate, whether that's Damon Arnett, whether that's Pete Werner, whether that's Tough Borland, whether that's any of the people that you have been yelling and screaming about for the last year. You have to just give it all a clean slate, because there are ways, if the coaching staff believes that players are not capable of playing at the level they need to play at, there are ways for the coaches to communicate that to guys and have them leave or suggest that they may want to consider leaving. None of those guys left. There are also ways a coaching staff can communicate to assistant coaches that they do not think that they are possibly capable of coaching at the level they need to be coaching at, and have them leave. And you notice there was a pretty big mass exodus from the Ohio State defensive coaching staff last year. So the coaching staff at Ohio State, Ryan Day in particular, has evaluated where he believes the issues lay last year. I think it is probably a good idea to lean on Ryan Day's football expertise, that Ryan Day may have a good sense for what the issues may have been last year. And the guys who are still there, give them a clean slate. See what happens this year before you completely write any of them off. Because there were guys who were put in unfair situations last year. There were, whether it's linebackers being sent out wide to cover wide receivers. Nope, that's not a good idea. Linebackers playing way too close to the line and getting caught up in the wash, and then not having linebackers there to stop running backs. Nope, that's not a good idea. So I bet you're not going to see that stuff happen again this year. And then let's see how Pete Werner plays, how Tough Borland plays, how Damon Arnett plays, how Isaiah Pryor plays, all of these guys who people were ready to throw into the Olentangy in the middle of last season. I just bet at least a couple of them are magically going to get a whole lot better this year.
It will be amazing, what that, I guess, just a year more of experience will do for them. But Pete Werner started as a true sophomore, and that's not easy to do. And so when somebody does that, I think it means something. Tough Borland starting as a redshirt freshman, I think that means something. Greg Madison also talked about Cade Stover, the freshman coming in, said he can't wait to coach him, can't wait. Then I asked him, is he going to be able to stay at linebacker? And he looked at me and smiled. He said, I can't wait. So I'm not going to say he implied that he is not going to stay at linebacker. He's one of those guys where he's already listed at like 6'4", 240 or whatever. So he'll start out at linebacker, but perhaps grow into a defensive end. And Greg Madison wasn't was non-committal on answering my question. Craig Young, Tom, is another guy who, as a high schooler, ran a 10.58 100 meters, is somewhere around 6'4", and who knows, 210 pounds right now. Talking to Greg Madison, he's another guy that he can't wait to see, but they don't really know necessarily where he's going to play yet. And it's unfortunate because I don't think Greg Madison understood the question when we were trying to nail it down, like what position is he going to start at? And the question wasn't worded well by somebody, and Madison thought he was talking about like positions as a whole, and then I didn't want to interrupt and go back, but I don't think he's going to be a safety. I don't think he's going to be a receiver because Madison's already talking about him. Madison coaches, so you guys know, he has taken on the Sams, because life as a defensive coordinator without a position, Madison didn't say this, and I've said this in the past, and Tom, you may have as well, but I think that was part of the problem with Greg Schiano last year. He had too much time on his hands to come up with things to do. If he had had a position to coach, he wouldn't have been so free. He would have been less, he would have been busier, and they would have had to have kept things a little simpler. And I think Madison was bored, or not bored, but he needed a position to coach, and so he's with the Sams. Maybe that's where, for me, I think that's where Craig Young starts out, and then maybe maybe he can also be a bullet, but probably eventually is a linebacker / defensive end.
That's what I would think. I mean, he is fast enough to be a bullet without a question right now. And it's just a matter of what does his body do in the next year? Do they keep him lean? If they keep him lean, then he stays as a Sam or a bullet. It would not be hard for him to get on that Javonte Jean-Baptiste diet and, get from 210 pounds to 240 pounds or 245 pounds and turn into a world-wrecking defensive end. If you can keep that quickness, the speed he's got, and put on some weight and get up to 245, 250 and stay anywhere close to that quick, you are going to ruin some offensive tackle's day as a defensive end. So there's a couple different ways he can go, and they may just kind of see how he does at linebacker this year and slide him one way or the other just as his, he's still young. His body is still developing. He's going to continue to grow. And if he can put weight on, if he can put good weight on and stay quick, then sure, slide him defensive end. Absolutely. If he does not put weight on or is just, that speed, you really want him at bullet, then great, keep him at bullet. They brought him in as an athlete. They have not had a ton of guys that they've brought in and just kind of gone, I don't know, we'll see where we're going to put him. Like, we'll see how it goes. He's got a spot where they started him. But, I mean, Brendan White was kind of like that when he came in. Brendan White did he start at wide receiver? He played wide receiver at some point. Then they figured out where he fit best, and then he kind of took off. Craig Young is not someone I would necessarily expect to see pushing for starting time this year. He is one of the more likely redshirt candidates, I think, in this freshman class. Give him a year with Coach Mick. See how he develops, see how that speed, if he keeps the speed, if he puts on weight, and, it may be 2 years before you kind of know where he's really going to end up. But with that kind of athleticism, he's going to be tough to keep off the field wherever he ends up.
And then in say 2021, you've got him and Zach Harrison at defensive end. You've got two guys who could probably, roll out of bed and run a 10.75, in 2 years. That's pretty, that should be fun to watch. And obviously there'll be 2 of 14 defensive ends in the rotation at that point, and we'll see how it goes. This, Greg Madison also said his expectation is for this to be an elite defense. And an elite defense is something that Ohio State hasn't had since 2016. I think that was an elite defense based on all of the plays that they made. To me, that's one sign of being an elite defense. And I still think they played well enough to beat Clemson in the bowl game, even though there were no points scored. And they were not the reason that 31 points were scored, obviously. I have high expectations, high hopes for this offensive line. I have confidence in it. I also really have high expectations for this defense. What would an elite defense mean for you, Tom? Is it, and I wanted to ask all of the coaches, I wanted to ask a couple of coaches, what is the most important stat for you? But before I got to that point, Greg Madison said something about he hates stats. And then Kevin Wilson also said at one point, stats are for losers. So I'm like, all right, well, scrap the stats question. Hey, believe me, you guys know, I also believe stats are for losers. Stat books are also for losers, as some of you know who have heard the show where I talked about my 21st birthday. But what is an elite defense in your mind, and do you think that happens this year?
An elite defense is probably one that is at least top 10 against both the rush and the pass. And since stats are for losers, I guess I'm really going to steer into this and talk about some advanced stats now. You can use the tried and true points per game, yards allowed per game. That's fine if you want to use those, but there are some kind of opponent adjusted metrics. I like S&P Plus, but there are kind of opponent adjusted metrics that filter out garbage time, filter out, if your offense is operating at a fast tempo and scoring quickly, your defense is going to give up more yardage and plays because it is going to be on the field for more plays. They're going to have more drives against them. So that means that you can have an equally good defense and give up more points, and that does not mean that you are worse than you would have been otherwise if your offense was playing trestle ball and just keeping the ball away from the other team. So I like the more advanced stats like an S&P Plus. Can they be a top 10 versus the rush and top 10 versus the pass kind of defense? I think so. I think that's within reason. There are some things that need to happen for them to get there. Let's see how the safety play goes this year. Let's see how the linebacker play goes this year. But and let's see if Jeff Okudah is what I think you and I both think he should be this year. If they have a number 1 draft pick season out of Jeff Okudah, and they have linebacker play that looks like Ohio State linebacker play, and they end up with 2 safeties that look like Ohio State safeties and don't spend a lot of time chasing guys 90 yards down the field, I think it's entirely reasonable for this to be a top 10, top 15 defense against both the rush and the pass. And at that point, you are pretty unquestionably elite because there are not that many teams that can do that on both, against both the run and the pass. So if you're top 10, top 15 against both, you're probably top 3, top 5 overall.
Yeah, and I think we both agree the talent is there, and it is reasonable. There's nothing unreasonable about expecting elite talent to equate to an elite defense. And Ryan Day believes he has made those the changes to get this defense to an elite level, and we'll see how that goes. Jeff Hafley is obviously going to be heavily involved in that. The back end last year, the secondary had its issues. We talked to Hafley early in the spring, and then this week was I think the second time we've gotten a chance to talk to him. Early in the spring, he was asked about Damon Arnett and the good and the bad. Something about how do you manage the good and the bad with Damon Arnett, or the pluses and the minuses. And he said at that time, I don't know. I haven't seen any bad from Damon Arnett. And I asked him about that. I reminded him about that on Wednesday, and he was like, it was almost like listening to Urban Meyer talk about John Simon or JT Barrett, where Jeff Hafley could not speak higher praise of Damon Arnett if he tried. He loves the guy. Damon Arnett is one of the most active guys. He talks a lot, and Hafley's okay with that because, he's a corner, and that's what cornerbacks do. And what he really likes about Arnett, other than, he's talented and he does what he's told and he learns, is what he kept saying is Arnett loves football and he loves to play it. And when you have that kind of excitement and that kind of drive, that makes him easy to coach. And everything that he has given Arnett to get better at, he has taken upon himself. And this is his last go-round. And you and I will talk about Jeff Okudah being the top guy. Hafley said, this is, Jeff Okudah, too many Jeffs on his team. That's one thing. But Jeff Okudah needs to get better with his hands at the line of scrimmage, and that's what he needs to work on. And if he does that, then he'll become a really good player. And Arnett is every concern that Buckeye fans have had about Damon Arnett. Hafley has not seen any of that other than maybe in last year's film. So I think when we talk about this being an elite defense, the rise of Damon Arnett shouldn't be overlooked. And I hope Buckeye fans give him a chance and don't just bail on him after the first pass interference, because that happens. It happened to Jeff Okudah, I think, 4 or 5 times last year. So even your favorite guys will mess up now and again. So Hafley is enamored with him, so I'm hoping Buckeye fans give him a break or give him a shot and let him, you know, I guess just give him a chance and see how it goes. Who knows? Maybe you'll be disappointed that you end up liking him.
What's the worst possible thing that could happen to Ohio State this year? Well, what if Pete Werner, Tuff Borland, and Damon Arnett all have good seasons? What will people be upset about then?
Downtown Athletic Club.
There you go. Yeah, Hafley said he wanted to come in, give everyone a clean slate. He did that, and he said until Arnett proves otherwise, he's not going to think about last year. He's watched last year's tape, thinks he's a really good player. You know, if you watch the film, he said you want to clean up some things, but that's fine. There's room for improvement there, but he is giving Damon Arnett a clean slate. You should give Damon Arnett a clean slate too, just like we talked about with Pete Werner, just like we talked about with Tuff Borland. Those are guys who, that last year, that was we are a press man team, and good old Rock. At some point, the person throwing Rock is perhaps more to blame than the Rock is. So
I'm just a rock.
You're just a rock. I'm just a caveman. Your defensive schemes frighten and confuse me. You have to, just like we talked about with Werner and Borland and all those guys, you've got to just give it a clean slate. Like Gerd said, do not, the first time he gives up a 15-yard completion or gets flagged for pass interference, do not jump on Twitter and at him, and just you've got to you have to just understand that there was some stuff going on last year that was probably a little bit out of the player's control that contributed to how things looked. So Damon Arnett is still here. Damon Arnett is still welcome back by the Ohio State coaches. You should make sure you're giving Damon Arnett the full benefit of the doubt this year, and give it some time, see how things happen. Everyone improves during the course of the season. It's going to be a new scheme this year. The defense, just like the offense, is going to probably improve throughout the course of the year. So give it some time. Nice deep breaths. You can do it, gang. You can make it through another Ohio State football season. Deep cleansing breaths. Bring in the what is it? Bring in the love, push out the jive. That's fine. That's just nice deep cleansing breaths. You can do it.
You got to get the poison out. Shaun Wade was also talked about. Jeff Hafley said he hasn't played any time at deep safety, which to me means like what we've speculated. Jordan Fuller would be the deep safety. Shaun Wade would be the strong safety, assuming he's going to win that job and they're not going to give it to maybe Fuller as the strong safety and Isaiah Pryor as the deep safety. I still think it'll be Shaun Wade there, and then he can move around, and him and Brendan White together can do all sorts of things. But Hafley said that Jordan Fuller's only running around a little bit right now, so he hasn't really gotten to see what he can do. He only knows that he's, I think, called him a superhuman person, or a super person, or a superhuman. Not superhuman, just a really good human. Not no powers other than he's smart, he's athletic, and I guess like Lex Luthor, basically. So maybe he is super. But with Fuller not being full go yet, that doesn't really concern me because this will be his third year of starting. I want Shaun Wade in this lineup, Tom, and I guess I'll just keep talking about it every week until it happens. And if it doesn't happen, I want people to start ripping on Damon Arnett. I want them to start ripping on Tuff Borland. I want them to start ripping on Pete Werner and just be angry because I think Shaun Wade's one of the best 11 and he should be out there. But I'm just me.
We know Ryan Day listens to the show. I guess we're going to find out if Jeff Hafley listens to the show. That's the next thing we got to learn. I mean, I would assume he seems smart, so I would assume he does. But we'll see. Wade does fit in at that other safety position. If you're going to have Fuller play that kind of center field position, Wade at that other safety spot would make a ton of sense because that other safety spot's going to be covering. That's a lot of covering slot guys, a lot of covering running backs out of the backfield. That is a spot where Shaun Wade could absolutely excel. So it would make a lot of sense to me that he would be slotting in there. He talked about him, looking at playing thirds, playing quarters, that they want him to be able to do all sorts of different stuff. And he is kind of he can slot in a whole bunch of different spots. If they need him to play corner, that's fine. If they need him to be slot corner, that's fine. If they need him to be that kind of close to the line safety, that's fine. He can fit wherever they need him because he has some good size. He's got kind of safety size, but he's got corner ball skills. That's a pretty unique combination to have in one guy. So he's someone that even if he doesn't end up with a completely fixed position, if he's fitting a couple different spots, I don't get the sense he's probably coming off the field a ton this year.
And this is a guy last year who practiced at safety, but then would play corner. Just he's naturally a corner, and he could just go out there and play it when games were out of hand, and they could throw him out there. He was the starting nickel, and then sometimes they need him out there at corner, and even though he hasn't really been practicing it, he can still go out there and do it. We've talked a lot about last year's defense and Greg Schiano and the troubles and the bad things that were being asked of players. Both Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison on Wednesday made comments that weren't necessarily, coaches won't take shots at other coaches. So when they are saying these things, it's up to us, I think, to connect the dots. And these dots are very large, and the line between them is very short. So it's really easy to do. But this is what Hafley said. He says, if we paralyze a guy because they have to think and we make them less of a player, then we are not doing our job as coaches. Madison, when talking about, this is part of his answer about Craig Young, he says, you have to make sure when you have very talented athletes that you don't give them so much that you slow them down. That's happened to a lot of people where a lot of football and you try to put all that football in, and pretty soon that 4.6 becomes a 4.8, and that's not good coaching. And Tom, I tweeted this out, and then you quote tweeted it and pretty much said what I said. You can connect the dots. I talked to Jeff Hafley at the coaches clinic. He and I were talking, and I mentioned to him that Jeff Okudah said they didn't really start focusing, working hard on looking back for the ball until like the fourth game of the season. And he's like, I just can't believe that. I know Greg Schiano is a very good coach. I know him. He's a great coach. And he said that, publicly to reporters and everything. But I truly believe Schiano he had too much time on his hands, because you've got two Ohio State defensive coordinators describing last year, not on purpose, just describing paralysis by analysis, as we've talked about. But they are also describing last year's defense, and both of them saying, you're not doing your job as a coach, or that's bad coaching. And when these guys are saying that, the rest of us are just looking around at each other like, he just said that. And that's pretty much what we all saw for the past 2 years, because as I mentioned before, I talked to Greg Schiano twice each year saying, do you have to simplify some stuff? And yeah, well, maybe it's not simplified, but we'll do something. And of course, they simplify things a little bit. It gets a little bit better, but it's not good coaching from your defensive coordinator saying that about essentially what was going on last year, although they weren't speaking towards last year. But
look, I don't want to say that it was way too complicated last year, but hypothetically, if a defense was too complicated, then a defense loaded with 4- and 5-star recruits might look like a defense loaded with 2- and 3-star recruits. Hypothetically, that is what that would look like if it was too complicated, is basically what they said. And I think it's probably easy to look back now and take shots at someone who has left town. But if you go back and listen to our podcast last fall,
Yeah.
This is not being retconned to fit the okay. Well, now Greg Schiano's out of town, and so now we can take shots at him. I mean, go back and listen. This is all the same stuff we were talking about last fall. It was things are too complicated. They're trying to do too much. The stuff like having the linebackers close to the line of scrimmage to keep the offensive linemen off of the defensive line. Like, that's the exact opposite of how you generally do it. The defensive line is there to occupy all those blockers and keep the linebackers clean to make the plays. That's how it's been done for decades. That is basically a fundamental tenet of a lot of defenses. And it just, you're right. There was, I think, a little bit too much time to think. And if you're a defensive coach and you have too much time to think, you're spending all this time thinking about stuff and you're coming up with these convoluted ideas. And then you're trying to get college kids who don't have nearly as much time to think about football. They are not thinking about football 80 hours a week. They do have to go to class occasionally. They do have a little bit of social life outside of football, even during the season. You cannot cram that much complicated, whether it's scheme, terminology, whatever, you can't cram that much into a college kid's head. It just, that is one of the main differences of coaching the pros versus coaching college. There are hard cap limits on how much practice and how much time you can require players to be in the facility. That's an NCAA rule. So you have a lot of restrictions on how much you can work with players on the field during the off season too. Like, they can't be out running. The coaching staff cannot be out with a ball on the field this time of year with the players. Like, it can't happen. So there's all sorts of things that make that, if it's too complicated, it's basically impossible. And you have guys looking lost, and that's when you have breakdowns. And that's exactly what you saw pretty much all of last year.
I'm thinking, like, if we were back in college playing for Greg Schiano and he's wanting to do all of this stuff, we'd be fighting. Like, I don't want to lose these Simpsons quotes that I have in my brain. And what you're trying to do is, if you start putting these plays into my head, they have to go somewhere, and I'm going to lose a lot of great references, a lot of timely comedy that I can bring out at any point to pretty much any situation I can answer with a Simpsons quote. And when you're telling me that I have to do this, like, around the defensive end, and then I have to chip this guy, I know I'm going to lose some Flanders quotes. And I don't think football is for me.
Me fail defense? That's impossible.
There you go. You could have lost that because of frickin' Schiano trying to get those quotes out of your head so he could have a better defense. And that, to me, that's not what college is about.
Hopefully what college is about for you is not what college is about for the Ohio State football team, or you may have
that's true. Right. Yeah. Now, as long as the players don't listen to the show, only the coaches listen to the show. We know that. So, Tom, you got anything else? We can wrap this puppy up.
Nope, I think we're good to go for this week. And we've got lots more offense to look forward to next week. That'll be fun.
Oh, also, thank you guys for the continuing ongoing ratings and reviews. During some cleanup last week, I found some great new items. I found a couple of programs to the 2015 Michigan State game. So if you leave us a 5-star review, we can get one of those out to you. Just DM me or DM Tom. DM me, because I've got them and I know you will want them. So yes, the programs to the 2015 Michigan State game, a classic among classics. So run right to your computer right now and go ahead and put that review in and send me a screenshot, and I'll get that out to you as soon as I can.
Yeah, while I was cleaning my garage, I found some used motor oil. So if you'd prefer that to the 2015 Michigan State programs, I can send that to you as well. Well,
I guess, yeah, whatever, whichever you would prefer. But I do also, I found my Rose Bowl program, and I even found the 2006 Sports Illustrated after the Michigan game. I found my 2002 Sports Illustrated after the national title. I guess it would be 2003. So maybe we could pop some of those in there as well. So thank you all for listening. We do appreciate it. Again, always tell your family. They need to know about us. They need to know about this show. Look what it's done for you. And we can do the same thing for your family, and we all know they need it. So thanks. Talk to you later.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say you will, now say you will. Oh yeah. Say you will, now say you will. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave